My daughter-in-law called the police to my house. She said I was mentally unstable and a danger to the children. When the police officer walked in, I just smiled. Come in. I have something I want you to hear. My name is Evelyn Hartman, 55 years old. I used to be a literature teacher, now living alone in a small 2-story house in the suburbs of Ashton Valley, where people still mow their lawns on Saturdays and nod politely when taking out the trash. This morning, I woke up at 6:30, brewed a pot of chamomile tea, baked a tray of cinnamon waffles, and told myself my biggest problem today was just whether to wear the gray or the light blue cardigan. I didn't know that 8 hours and 12 minutes later, I would be facing the first police officer to ever cross the threshold of my life. Officer Ryan Cole. Tall, young, his face a mix of serious and confused. Behind him was Melissa, my daughter-in-law, playing the part of the good wife threatened by her mother-in-law. Her voice was loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "Don't go in alone. She's lost control." I looked straight at her, then turned to the officer. "Would you like some tea?" "I just made it." He hesitated slightly. "Tea would be fine, ma'am." I led him down the hallway, where sunlight streamed through the window, reflecting on the vase of wild daisies I'd arranged last night. My kitchen, clean, bright, and smelling of cinnamon, was clearly not the setting for someone who had lost their mind. "Mrs. Hartman," he began, "we received a call from Ms. Melissa Hartman stating that you were exhibiting erratic behavior, possibly posing a danger to your grandchildren." I set a teacup on the table, gently opened the drawer to my right, and took out a small object the size of a cigarette pack, a digital voice recorder. I placed it right in the middle of the table between him and me. She said I was dangerous? I pressed play, a small static hiss, then Melissa's voice, clear, sharp, without a trace of a tremor. "Listen here, Evelyn. This house is mine. The children are mine. You are just a lonely old woman nobody needs." The officer's hand froze, the teacup stopping in midair. I said nothing. I just looked out the window. Melissa was pacing on the lawn, smiling faintly as if everything was still under control. I turned off the recorder, looking back at him. That was from last week, on Thursday. She came to my house to pick up the kids' toys. "I think you should hear the rest when Daniel, my son, arrives," he wrote in his notebook. His voice was professional, but his hand trembled slightly. "She said you often mix up days, repeat questions, forget promises." Yes, that's what she plants in everyone's mind. I took a sip of tea. She's a nurse. She knows exactly how to use pathological language to whitewash her manipulation. I pointed to the teapot. "You know, Officer Cole, manipulators always use the same tactic. They make you doubt yourself." I used to doubt myself until I started recording. Outside, Melissa continued her performance. "Officer Cole, be careful. She's hiding something in her pocket." I laughed. "It's actually my phone. Would you like to check my pockets?" He shook his head. "No need, ma'am." I tilted my head, observing the young man. He was trying to stay calm, but his eyes had changed. He no longer saw an unstable person in me, only a woman holding onto her own sanity with every audio file. 4:45 a.m. My home phone rang. The screen displayed Daniel Jr. I motioned for Officer Cole to listen on speakerphone. "Mom?" Melissa called me. "She said you threatened to harm her. What's going on?" I spoke slowly. "It's nothing, son. I'm just making tea and talking to a very polite officer." A pause. Daniel's voice lowered. I'm on my way. I hung up, setting the receiver back. You know, I said, a good liar always believes they're writing a better script than reality. But her script just got torn up. The kitchen was quiet, only the ticking of the clock and the smell of cinnamon in the air. I looked at Officer Cole, giving a small smile. Now, would you like to hear the next part? It starts with a much more interesting sentence. He leaned in slightly. What's that, ma'am? I pressed the button. Melissa's voice rang out again. Daniel is too weak to see what needs to be done, but I'm not. I turned it off. You see, I said softly, when people think they're the director, they often forget the camera is rolling. I used to think my daughter-in-law was a gift from God. Now I know. Sometimes gifts come with a fuse. My name is Evelyn Hartman. I was 52 then. My hair still light brown. Still confident I could read a 700-page novel in 2 nights. I first met Melissa Reed at a church party. She came with Daniel, my son. He had just finished teaching, chalk dust still on his shirt sleeve. Melissa came over to greet me, bringing a scent of vanilla and a smile that could make anyone lower their guard. I've heard so much about you from Daniel. You teach literature, right? I just love poetry. I remember smiling. The girl was pretty, clever, and knew how to use words. A person who knows to say, you teach literature, right? Instead of, are you his mom the teacher? Is someone who pays attention to every detail. At the time, I called it refinement. Now, I call it rehearsal. After the wedding, Melissa began building her image as the perfect daughter-in-law. She baked cookies for the church, volunteered at the children's hospital, posted family dinner photos with the hashtag #WeLoveMyMamaEvie. The whole town loved her, and I, foolishly, did too. The first morning she moved in, I saw her hanging their wedding photo in the living room. I said, "That's lovely, but you could hang it a bit higher. The frame is a little crooked," she replied, sweet as honey. "Oh, you have such a good eye, Mom. I'll fix it right away." But that evening, the frame was still crooked, just crooked in the other direction. Little things started to happen. I'd leave my keys on the shelf. The next day, they were gone. I'd note a dental appointment, and that morning, Melissa would say, "Did you forget, Mom? Today isn't Thursday." I'd open my phone. It was Thursday. She would smile. "Oh, the phone's clock must be wrong." Her voice was like she was comforting a patient. I laughed at the time. Thinking back, it was the laughter of someone who was starting to be programmed. 3 months after the wedding, Daniel called me in the middle of a class. "Mom, Melissa said you've been forgetting to eat. Is that true?" "No, I'm still eating 3 meals a day." "She's just worried about you." I fell silent, because I knew my son spoke those words in someone else's voice. She didn't hit me, didn't curse, didn't do anything illegal. She just gently touched the truth, turning it 1 degree. Just enough for everyone to start doubting me, and for me to start doubting myself. I remember one afternoon in March, the sun spilling onto the daisy garden. Melissa brought cinnamon rolls out to the porch, sitting next to me. "Mom, have you noticed you've been more forgetful lately?" "Not really." "Why do you ask?" "The other day you said you'd pick Sophie up from school, but you never came. You told me to come on Thursday, didn't you?" "It was Wednesday, Mom." She said it as lightly as a breath. But I knew I had written Thursday in my calendar. After that afternoon, I started writing everything down, not because I suspected her, but because I was afraid I really had a problem. One evening, Daniel and Melissa invited me over for dinner. I brought a bottle of red wine, the kind Harold, my late husband, used to like. During the meal, Melissa told the neighbors at the table that I was starting to get things mixed up. People chuckled lightly, the polite kind. I just stayed silent, swirling the wine in my glass, watching my distorted reflection on the tabletop. When I got home, I sat by the window and turned on the voice recorder for the first time, not to catch her, but to hear my own voice, to see if it really trembled like they said. The following week, Melissa came to visit, saying she was worried about me. "Mom, you live alone. It must be lonely." "Do you ever hear strange noises at night?" I replied. "Yes, just the neighbor's cat." She tilted her head slightly, her voice soft. "Sometimes auditory hallucinations start just like that, you know?" Then she laughed, as if she were just kidding. She left, leaving behind her expensive perfume and a sickeningly sweet chill on my skin. What I would later understand was the fear of being framed as insane. That was when I started recording regularly. I placed the recorder in the kitchen, the living room, even in my pocket when she stopped by. Not to retaliate, but to archive the truth before someone else edited it. On May 10th, I got the first segment, the exact one I played for Officer Cole this morning. "This house is mine. The children are mine. And you senile old fool, should know your place." She said it, in a voice as light as if she were discussing the rain. And I knew, in that moment, her performance had torn. That night, I made a cup of tea, sat by the window looking at my son's house. The living room light was on late. Melissa's shadow flickered behind the curtain. She was on the phone, her voice sweet as syrup. I couldn't hear clearly, only guessing a few words. Pathology, psychiatric evaluation, safety of the children. The wind blew, making the street lamp on the porch flicker. In that light, I swore I saw Harold's face, my late husband, reflected in the glass, nodding at me as if to say, "You're right. Now fight." From that day on, I stopped being afraid. I just observed. And when a manipulator feels they are completely trusted, they reveal their true nature faster than any security camera. I didn't intend to record that day, but she said one thing that made me turn the device on. "I am Evelyn Hartman." And on May 10th of last year, I recorded the first piece of evidence proving that I wasn't crazy. I was just being systematically driven to seem that way by someone very smart. The afternoon was damp, the clouds low, the wind from the river carrying moisture. Melissa appeared at my door, gift bag in hand, smile still in place. "I'm just stopping by to grab some of Sophie's toys. You don't mind, do you?" I nodded. "No. Come in." She stepped inside, her eyes scanning the kitchen as if doing an inspection. I kept washing the dishes, pretending not to notice. Melissa set the bag down, then said, "Mom, have you been feeling tired lately? Have you ever forgotten to eat?" I dried my hands, turning to face her. "No, I eat normally." "That's good. I was just afraid. You were starting to skip meals like last time." "What last time?" "Last week you said you'd pick Sophie up from school, but you never showed." I knew I had made no such promise that day. I opened my mouth to speak, but then stopped. At that moment, only one thought was in my head. If I say anything, she will twist it to her advantage. I pulled my phone from my apron pocket, placing it on the kitchen counter. Pressed record. No one noticed. "Melissa," I said, "don't you think you're worrying a little too much?" She smiled. "It's just concern." Then she stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You know, Mom, I work at the hospital. I see many people start to change without realizing it. They often get defensive, just like you're doing now. I swallowed a hot breath. What are you implying? Nothing at all. She shrugged. I'm just afraid that one day Daniel will have to make a difficult decision. The recording ended with the sound of the door closing. I listened to it again, many times. Each time, I discovered another small thing in her voice. The drawl at the end of a sentence, the pause between two words, as if she were setting a trap with her intonation. I've lived long enough to know the truly terrifying people never shout. They just speak softly and leave room for others' imaginations to do the rest. The next day, I took the recording to Grace Miller, my neighbor. She listened, was silent for a moment, then said, "She's not asking Evelyn, she's suggesting." I nodded. Yes, and now I have proof. From then on, every time Melissa entered the house, I turned on the recorder. Not to catch mistakes, but to catch the rhythm. Manipulators have a rhythm. If you listen long enough, you'll hear the pattern. An implied question, a compliment paired with doubt, a piece of information accidentally leaked at just the right time. 3 weeks later, I had the second recording. She was on the phone, thinking I couldn't hear. "Yes, doctor. More. I think she's deteriorating. We should probably start the evaluation soon." Her voice turned sweet. "No, she won't agree to an exam. But I could arrange it so she doesn't know." That sentence was like a knife slowly sliding across a wrist. Not deep enough to bleed, but deep enough for you to understand the murderous intent in the speaker's mind. That night, I sat in the kitchen, opened my notebook, and wrote down every detail. Date, time, content, tone, the look in her eyes. An old teacher turned amateur investigator. I was so careful that I numbered each audio file like I was grading student papers. 1. Kitchen conversation 002. Call to Dr. Moore 003. Words to Daniel about decline. The first 3 entries of a war that would last nearly 7 months. During that time, Melissa continued her performance, giving cookies to neighbors, hosting parties, smiling and calling me Mama Evie. But after every smile, I started to see the small cracks around her eyes. The smile never reached her pupils. A person who lies for years eventually forgets how to smile for real. On July 2nd, she walked into my kitchen as I was peeling apples. "Mom, I think you should ask Dr. Moore for a memory test. Just as a precaution, it's nothing." I turned, the knife in my hand still on the cutting board. "Are you worried about me?" "Of course." "Thank you. But I'm fine. And you, are you fine?" Her smile faltered for a beat, then she left. I hit record as soon as the door closed, and in the recording, I heard her call someone, her voice low. "She's starting to get defensive." Good. The more defensive she is, the easier it is to prove she's delusional. I knew I was in a long game, and I had to learn to play back. No longer a teacher, I became a student of my own suspicion. I learned to be silent, to observe, to save. I stopped reacting, letting her talk herself into her own trap. One night, I lay listening to all the tapes. Her voice, my voice, the clinking of teacups, the ticking clock, all mixed together like a distorted symphony of 2 women living in one house where only one knew the game was being played. When the 10th recording finished, I turned off the machine, looking out the window. The moonlight covered the daisy garden, peaceful to the point of absurdity. I took a sip of cold tea and whispered, "She wants to turn me into a crazy person. But in reality, I am turning her into living evidence." I never knew I had a psychiatric file until I saw my own signature on it. The problem was, I had never signed it. I am Evelyn Hartman, 55 years old, once taught students how to analyze Shakespeare, now learning how to analyze a fraud. That morning, Grace called me over. She worked at the town clinic, where Melissa occasionally worked shifts as a nurse. Evelyn, I'm not sure I should be showing you this, Grace said, but your name is in the internal records. On the table was a faintly printed clinic form titled Basic Psychological Evaluation, Hartman, Evelyn. At the bottom was the signature, mine. I looked at it closely, every curve of the fountain pen, every space between the letters. It was so similar, I had to swallow hard. When did you sign this? Grace asked. I never signed it, I said slowly, each word cutting my throat. The doctor's notes section read, Patient exhibits mild paranoia, shows a tendency to record and suspect family members. I laughed, just a little. The kind of laugh when you see your reflection in someone else's medical file. In the afternoon, I went to St. Mary's Hospital. I met Dr. Moore, the name on the form. I want to ask about this file. He looked at the paper, frowning. This isn't in the official system. Who gave this to you? A friend in administration. My name has been forged here. I have never met you. I exhaled slowly. Then we have a mutual problem, Doctor. That night I went home, turned on the recorder, pressed play. Melissa's voice from 2 weeks ago when I was making tea. Dr. Moore will understand. I'll send your file over internally. You just need to sign this small confirmation form for the insurance. I remembered clearly that paper was a dental insurance form, not a psychiatric file. She had swapped the pages before submitting it. I opened my laptop, logged into the hospital portal, using my late husband's patient ID, Harold Hartman, as my name was still linked as a beneficiary. Under Family Health, I saw Evelyn Hartman. Cognitive Assessment. Pending requester, Melissa Reed Hartman, pediatric nurse. I stared at that line for so long my hand trembled, not from fear, but from the realization. She was building a parallel legal file on me. The next morning, I called lawyer James Rowe, who had handled Harold's insurance papers. James, I need to verify a falsified medical record. Can this be used as criminal evidence? If there's a forged signature and unauthorized data access, absolutely. Then are you free tomorrow morning? For you, always. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the kitchen with only the clock and the yellow light. On the table were 3 items: the voice recorder, the fake file, a cold cup of tea. These 3 things were my entire life now: sound, evidence, and silence. The next day. I walked into the lawyer's office with my old canvas bag. James greeted me with a warm handshake. You're always as calm as you were in the classroom, he smiled. When people want to turn me into a joke, it's best I look very patient, I replied. I gave him the recording, the printed file, and Dr. Moore's confirmation letter. He finished reviewing, silent for a moment. Evelyn, if I were you, I'd start backing everything up. I already have, I smiled. 3 USB drives, 2 cloud accounts, and 1 hidden in the peppermint tea canister. That evening, I received a call from an unknown number. Evelyn? This is Dorothy from Harrington Wells. I saw Melissa Reed asking a lawyer about guardianship procedures for a relative. When? 3 weeks ago. She said her mother-in-law had memory problems, needed to prepare for the worst. I sat up straight. 3 weeks ago was when I discovered the first recording. She knew I was catching on, and now she was making the first move. I picked up the recorder, looking at it like a gun. No bullets, but it could shoot down her whole play. I pressed record, my voice echoing in the still air. June 12th, 10:47 a.m. I, Evelyn Hartman, am officially beginning my counterattack. Not an interrogation room, just an old kitchen, a wooden table, and two women. One speaking the truth, one constructing a truth. I, Evelyn Hartman, made tea at 6:45 a.m. Black tea, 2 spoons of honey. The scent of cinnamon in the air, like a pretend peace. The door opened. Melissa entered, right on cue, as if she had timed my biological clock. "You're up early, Mom," she said, smiling. "Habit. What about you? No work today?" "I do, but I wanted to stop by and see if you're okay." I nodded, placing another teacup opposite her. "Then drink up. You'll need it." I opened the drawer, took out the folded medical file, placed it in the center of the table. She looked at it, her smile faltering for half a second, long enough for me to confirm she recognized it. "What is this?" "You tell me." Silence. She pretended to read. Her throat swallowed dryly. "Oh, this is just a draft of an assessment, Mom. Don't worry." "What draft has my signature on it?" "You signed it when I gave you the insurance papers." I smiled lightly. "Dental insurance?" I leaned in, my voice as steady as a clock's second hand. "You sent this file to the hospital system, forged my signature, impersonated Dr. Moore, and added a note. Mild paranoid symptoms. Why didn't you just write very lucid, currently staring at a fraud?" She took a deep breath, then said in that familiar professional voice, "Mom, you're misunderstanding. This was an administrative error, not intentional." "Oh, and the petition for guardianship consultation? Was that also an administrative error?" I presented the printout from the Harrington Wells Law Office. Her name, her signature, the date sent. Melissa turned pale. "Who gave you this?" "They call it a concerned party," she forced a laugh. "Are you threatening me, Mom?" "No. I'm archiving evidence." The silence fell, thick as congealed honey. I placed the voice recorder on the table. The red light blinked. "What are you doing?" "Recording history, so that later, when people ask when I started to lose my mind, I'll have a record stating clearly, exactly when you started to get scared." She stood up, about to leave. "I'm not going to sit here and be slandered." "Try and leave." My voice wasn't loud, but it was cold enough to stop her in her tracks. She turned back, her eyes filled with a rage disguised as pity. "You need help. Daniel and I only want what's best for you." "What's best? Or what's convenient?" I tilted my head, pouring more tea. "You're good, Melissa. You know how to use medical language, the law, and family trust as weapons. But I used to grade essays exactly like this, and I recognize the logical fallacies in every sentence." She took a step back, then lowered her voice. "If you make this public, you will humiliate Daniel. Lonely, sick. Is that what you want?" "No." I looked straight at her. "I want justice." I pressed play. Her voice filled the room, Melissa's own voice. "From last week. Dr. Moore, I think she's starting to get seriously confused. She might need a guardian." The kettle whistled. Melissa's hand trembled, reaching for the recorder. I pushed my teacup in the way. "Be careful, it's hot." She stood still, shaking slightly, then whispered, "You'll regret this." "Maybe. But at least I'll regret it in a clear, non-trembling voice." She left, her high heels clicking on the wooden floor. The door slammed. I sat back, sipped my cold tea, and spoke to the recorder. June 13th. The liar is starting to panic. Next step, working with the police. I didn't call the police. She did, and it was the biggest mistake of her life. Tuesday morning, 7:58, a knock at the door. 3 knocks firm even, not a neighbor. I opened it. Officer Cole stood there, young, polite, light blue jacket, the smell of coffee and rain still on him. Mrs. Hartman? Yes. Come in. Behind him, Melissa stood on the walkway, hands clutched to her chest, her face as serious as if attending her own funeral. I'm just worried about her, she said loudly. She's unstable. I didn't answer. Just turned. Come in, officer. I have something I want you to see. He stepped inside. The kitchen was still bright, 2 teacups still on the table. I poured a fresh one. I don't have coffee, but my cinnamon tea is famous. Tea is good. His voice was still awkward, young. A part of me suddenly pitied him. They don't train you for this kind of sophisticated deception. I pointed to the window. Outside, Melissa was still standing there, playing her role perfectly, the worried woman looking into her unstable mother-in-law's home. Officer Cole, I said, you were called here because of an allegation that I threatened my daughter-in-law, correct? Yes, ma'am. Good. Then listen closely. I opened the drawer, took out the recorder. Small, silver, a scratch near the play button. I placed it on the table, so lightly the sound was like a trigger being pulled. For the past 2 months, I have recorded every conversation with her, and I think you'll like this morning's recording the best. I pressed play. Melissa's voice filled the air, clear, colder than the rain. If you make this public, you will humiliate Daniel. Lonely, sick. Is that what you want? When she said the word sick, I looked at Officer Cole. His hand gripped the teacup so tightly that water spilled. Do you have other tapes? 12. And you have evidence she forged medical records? Yes, right here. I handed him the file, complete with Dr. Moore's confirmation. He read it, nodding slowly. This is serious. I know. She called you here to stage a scene of an old woman out of control. But as it turns out, I have the real script. He looked up, his eyes a professional mix of confusion and astonishment. You know, I've seen many fraud cases, but no one has ever been as prepared as you. I taught for 30 years. Every liar has a spelling mistake. Outside, Melissa yelled, "Don't believe her! I'm just trying to help." I turned to the officer softly. Let her in, officer. Let her lie in front of a witness. Melissa walked in, her perfume hitting me, sweet to the point of nausea. I'm worried about my mother-in-law. She's been acting erratically. Specifically? Cole asked. She's saying I forged hospital records, that I want her assets. Did you know paranoid individuals often think others are out to get them? I sipped my tea. And manipulators often start by quoting medical facts to seem credible. Cole held up a hand for silence, turning on his own recorder. I'll be recording this conversation for fairness. I nodded. Perfect. Mrs. Hartman, Cole asked, do you have concrete proof that Ms. Melissa falsified records? Yes. I handed him the printout of the internal email between Melissa and the St. Mary's admin, forwarded by Grace. She sent a request to update my file using her hospital credentials, unauthorized. Melissa turned white. That was a technical error. No, it was a technical crime, I interrupted. I also printed the access logs, login fingerprint, read M. The air was as heavy as stone. Cole tilted his head. Ms. Melissa, do you have anything to say? I was only trying to help. Help who? Help the family. By creating a false psychiatric file? She looked at me, her voice low, trembling. You are destroying everything. No, I said. I am rebuilding. I placed one more paper on the table. The guardianship petition, signed by Melissa, from 3 weeks ago. Cole read it, then let out a low whistle. "This is enough for a criminal investigation, Mrs. Hartman." As he stepped outside to call his station, I looked through the glass. Melissa stood frozen in the sunlight, her face pale, lips pressed tight. In that moment, I knew the war had turned. She no longer controlled the narrative. I turned off my recorder, put it in the drawer. Steam was still rising from the tea on the table. "June 15th, I said softly. "The director has fallen from her chair. There is no rope as reliable as the law, but to bind a manipulator, first, you must teach them to fear silence." I, Evelyn Hartman, 55 years old, sat across from lawyer James Rowe in his small office that smelled of old oak and coffee. Outside the window, rain was pouring, the kind that just falls straight down, no slant, no swirl, like justice should be. Direct, no detours. James flipped through each file, his brow furrowed slightly. She accessed the medical system with her hospital account, requested a psychiatric evaluation, forged your signature, and called the police to create a record of unstable behavior. "All within 2 months," I replied. "Evelyn, she's smart. This is more sophisticated than most cases I've handled." "True, but I have something she doesn't." "What's that?" "Patience and a timeline." I pushed a thick stack of papers toward him, a 3-color timeline. Blue, my actions. Red, her words. Yellow, concrete evidence. James chuckled softly. "You were a teacher, weren't you? 30 years. I know how to grade a paper. And what do you think?" "I think criminals always forget the punctuation." He leaned back, breathing out a long sigh. "I will file a complaint with the county court, along with a request for a protective order. If approved, she's not allowed to contact or approach you within 100 meters. And the hospital records? I'll let the police handle that part. But Evelyn..." He looked at me, his voice lowering. "From now on, don't be home alone." I smiled, setting my teacup down. "James, I've lived alone since Harold died. The only thing I'm afraid of is forgetting how strong I used to be." He nodded, slowly. "You haven't forgotten. You just need to prove to the world that you still remember." In the afternoon, Officer Cole called back. "Mrs. Hartman, we have opened an investigation into the falsification of medical documents and willful false reporting. We need your cooperation to testify. I'll be there. And you should know, Ms. Melissa has hired a lawyer." "Good. A good actress always needs a supporting director." The next morning, 8:32 a.m., I arrived at the Central Falls police station. The interrogation room wasn't much different from my kitchen, just missing a teapot. Cole turned on the recorder. "Do you confirm that Ms. Melissa Reed Hartman accessed your medical records without your permission?" "Yes." "Do you have proof?" "Yes. And I brought cookies." He looked up, smiling. "Cookies?" "Teacher's habit. When submitting a test, always bring a gift to soften up the proctor." I pushed the USB drive and the file of recordings across the table. 12 audio files, 2 doctor's confirmations, 3 internal email chains. Enough to start the net. That evening, I received a call from Dorothy, the secretary at Harrington Wells. "Evelyn, I don't know if I should say, but Melissa came back to the office today. She was asking about the procedure for long-term care authorization." "For whom?" "For you. And she was still using your address as her residence." I was silent. In my mind, the logical pieces snapped together. She knew she was under investigation, but she was still building her case. Like a trapped fox, still trying to dig a new tunnel while the noose was already tightening. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the window, opened my notebook, added a line. June 17th, 11:41 p.m. She hasn't stopped. She thinks she still controls the story. I poured more tea. The steam fogged the glass, reflecting my face. No longer tired, just the cold light of someone who is awake to the very end. The next morning, James called. Evelyn, the court has granted the protective order. She is not allowed near your house or to contact you directly. So she'll find a detour. She always does. What detour? The children. Daniel. Pity. He sighed. I'll contact CPS first. You just be prepared. She will definitely countersue. I hope so, I said, sipping my tea. If she doesn't fight back, I won't have a next chapter. I ended that day by copying all the files onto an encrypted hard drive, placing it in the peppermint tea box, along with a handwritten letter. If anyone is reading this, it means I didn't get to finish the story. But don't worry. I've written enough for her to finish herself. I thought she was out of tricks. But it turns out a manipulator always has a second line, and it works even from behind bars. I, Evelyn Hartman, 55 years old, have lived long enough to know justice doesn't end with handcuffs. It only begins there. 3 days after Melissa was detained, my house was quiet again, as if no one had ever argued in it. The clinking of teacups, the ticking of the clock, sounds I once considered normal, now became the soundtrack of a temporary victory. But at 9:46 a.m., the phone rang. Unknown number. A woman's voice. Professional, cold, with a northern accent. Mrs. Hartman? This is Dr. Patricia Williams from Child Protective Services. We received an anonymous report regarding the risk of emotional abuse towards the two children, Emma and Tyler Collins. I set my tea down. What risk? The report states that the father, Mr. Daniel Collins, is showing signs of instability due to stress from an ongoing legal case, and that you, the paternal grandmother, are exhibiting controlling behavior affecting the children's psychological well-being. I closed my eyes. 1 beat. 2. Ms. Williams, does the person who filed the report have a name? No, but the file indicates this person is a medical professional. I smiled, coldly. And let me guess. Female, Southern accent, used to work at St. Mary's? I cannot confirm that information, ma'am. No need. I just confirmed it. That night, Daniel came over. His face was pale, exhausted. They called me in for an evaluation, said someone reported I was unstable, that I might harm the kids. Do you know who reported it? Do you even have to ask, Mom? We sat in silence in the kitchen. The smell of cold tea, rain, and anxiety all mixed together as if the house itself was breathing heavily. Mom, Daniel said, how can she be in jail and still control things out here? For someone like her, jail is just another call center. I opened my laptop, logged into my email. 10 new messages. 8 of them were from reporters. The headlines were similar. Mrs. Hartman's reaction to allegations about her son's mental health. Is the Hartman family really hiding something? An inside source says, Mrs. Hartman controls her son and grandchildren. Melissa had turned the media chessboard. From the one being investigated, she had turned herself into the victim and us into the dysfunctional family. I called James Rowe, my voice not trembling, just cold. James, I need to get one step ahead. What are you planning? To tell the story. This time, with truth, not tears. The media? Yes. If she chooses the airwaves, I choose the light. 3 hours later, I called Amanda Rodriguez, the reporter who had scheduled an interview with me on Channel 7. Amanda, do you still have the recording of our old interview? Of course. Do you want to re-air it? No. I want to do part 2. Theme: when a manipulator tries to reach out from behind bars. She was silent for a moment, then laughed. I like that title. When are you free? Tomorrow morning, and I'll bring evidence. That night, I noted, June 22nd, 11:07 p.m. The inmate is trying to rewrite the story. Counterattack. Publicize the truth. I replayed an old recording, Melissa's voice speaking to Dr. Henderson. She's paranoid. I just want to protect my family. Listening again, I heard something different. It wasn't the voice of someone telling the truth, but the voice of someone afraid of losing control. The next morning, I wore my light blue jacket and went to the station with Daniel. The studio door was cold and bright, the lights shining straight down like a testimony. Amanda set up the microphone asking, "Are you afraid of the public reaction, bringing family matters on air?" "I am afraid," I replied. "But being silent for too long is also a form of complicity." She nodded. "Do you have a message for the woman who started all this?" I looked straight into the camera. "Yes. Thank you, Melissa, for teaching me that. Sometimes, to protect your family, you have to learn how to be dangerous in silence." That evening, the news aired. Social media exploded. People started calling Melissa the puppet nurse. People who had worked with her began sending anonymous messages. She used to manipulate patients. She faked leave records to get insurance money. The legal net was no longer just mine. It belonged to the whole city. 2 days later, Officer Cole called. "Mrs. Hartman, the court has denied bail. She will remain in custody until the trial." "And the CPS report?" "It's being retracted. The sender has been identified as Melissa Reed Hartman, inmate 50427. They're calling it continued dangerous behavior." I nodded slightly, though he couldn't see. "Thank you, officer. It seems justice is learning to pronounce my name correctly." That night, I sat alone, teacup in front of me, recorder by my hand. I pressed record. June 25th. I am still here, and she is where she deserves to be. I paused for a few seconds, then smiled. The story isn't over, but this time, I'm the one holding the pen. I didn't eat breakfast that day. The feeling of fullness came from something else. Justice was about to be served, hot. I, Evelyn Hartman, sat in the second row on the right in the Central Falls County Courthouse. July 10th. No rain, just a light breeze as if the city itself wanted to witness the end of someone who thought she was the author. In front of me, Melissa Reed Hartman. Hair neat, gray blouse, no makeup. For the first time, I saw her real face. Pale, no artificial layer, just the emptiness of someone who has lost her audience. The court calls the case of the defendant, Melissa Reed Hartman, on the charges of falsifying medical records, false reporting, and willful psychological manipulation for financial gain. The judge's voice echoed through the room, cold as steel. I looked at my watch, 9:02 a.m., the exact time she had called the police to my house. Coincidence or karma? The prosecuting attorney, a young woman named Carter, stood up. "Your Honor, we have audio evidence provided by the victim, Mrs. Evelyn Hartman. These recordings clearly show systematic manipulation and intent to defraud." She opened her laptop. A click echoed. Then Melissa's voice filled the courtroom. "If you make this public, you will humiliate Daniel. Lonely, sick. Is that what you want?" No one spoke. No one needed to. From the back of the room, I heard spectators gasp softly. The defense attorney stood, trying to recover. "Your Honor, the words in that recording could have been spliced." Carter interrupted. "Objection. We have the original data integrity confirmed by the police, and a voice match analysis from the hospital where the defendant used to work. Melissa looked up. Her eyes darted quickly towards me. Not hatred, not pleading, just the panic of someone who has lost control of the strings. I remembered what she once said. Paranoid people often think someone is against them, and today, here she sat, looking left and right, at every face in the room, as if everyone was whispering behind her back. Perhaps, finally, she knew what real paranoia felt like. It was my turn to testify. I stepped up to the stand, placing my hand on the Bible. Mrs. Evelyn Hartman, please recount the events in your own words. I spoke slowly, every word, like reading from my own journal. She came to us with a voice as sweet as candy, but once she was trusted, she began to edit every little memory, every small story, until I doubted myself. I recorded her not to accuse, but to remember that I was not crazy. The air was thick. The judge looked up, holding my gaze for a long time. And what made you decide to call the police? A signature. Mine. On a file I had never touched. When a liar borrows your voice to rewrite your life, that's no longer family. That's a battlefield. When I left the stand, Daniel gently took my hand. He said nothing, but the squeeze was enough. I had protected him, and the grandchildren who were too young to understand why their grandfather was in heaven and their mother was in jail. The final part of the trial was the newest recording, extracted from Melissa's phone calls in the detention center. Carter pressed play, Melissa's voice thick, speaking to another inmate. I didn't lose. I just picked the wrong person to stage the play with. That woman, Evelyn, she's not like other old ladies. She knows how to act silent. A murmur spread. The judge raised his gavel. The confession is clear enough. Defendant Melissa Reed Hartman is hereby sentenced to 7 years in prison for fraud, forgery, and abuse of familial trust. The gavel struck 3 times. Thud, thud, thud. That sound, to me, was more beautiful than Chopin. After the trial, reporters surrounded me. One asked, "Do you have any words for the public?" I turned, looking straight into the camera. If you are listening to this and someone is making you doubt your memory, your character, or your own sanity, press record. Not for revenge, but to save the real version of yourself. In the afternoon, when I got home, the clock read 5:12. Late sunlight streamed through the window, landing on the wooden table. I set my teacup down, opened my leather-bound journal, wrote the last line of the day, July 10th. Justice has no smell, but today it smells like cinnamon tea and jasmine. No more enemies, only the ticking clock and a cold cup of tea. 3 weeks after the trial. August 1st, a Charleston morning full of sun, a river breeze as light as the breath of someone waking from a long sleep. Evelyn Hartman, 55 years old, no longer going to court, no longer recording, no longer having to press record every time someone walks in. But I still keep that recorder on the table, by the window, not for protection, but to remind myself that I survived with my sanity. The house was quiet. Daniel brought the 2 kids over for me to watch for a few days. The children ran around the garden, laughing brightly, the smell of soap mixing with the sunshine. That sound filled the empty spaces Melissa had once taken. I watched them and remembered myself 10 years ago. I, too, used to trust others so much I lost my own voice. And I suddenly understood. Justice isn't just a verdict. It's when you can sit still, with nothing left to prove. At noon, I made tea. No more trembling hands, cinnamon, honey, and dried orange peel. The three things that kept me tethered to the world when everyone thought I was drifting away. On the table, the morning paper was still fresh. The Hartman case, a warning about manipulation in families. Below it was a picture of me, in profile, smiling slightly. A real smile. No acting required. In the afternoon, Officer Cole stopped by. Shirt sleeves rolled up, the tired smile of a man whose job is to see too many lies. I just wanted to say, "You taught me something the police academy doesn't." "What's that, Officer Cole?" "That the most dangerous person isn't the one who's angry, but the one who says, 'I'm only trying to help.'" I laughed, offering him a cup of tea. "I guess you now suspect all doctors and nurses." "After this, I only trust people with a tea cabinet, not a medicine cabinet." We laughed. The sound was simple, clean, like when you've washed away a stain and see no scratch underneath. At night, after the children were asleep, I opened my notebook again. The last page. I wrote a short line. August 1st. I have been silent long enough. Now I just need to live. I closed the notebook, placing it on the peppermint tea box, where the USBs and evidence used to be hidden. Now, inside, there were only a few sugar packets, a few unsent letters. Before bed, I opened the window. The wind brought the scent of jasmine and the last cicadas of the season. I closed my eyes, listening to myself. Evelyn Hartman, once diagnosed as paranoid, but perhaps in a world full of pretenders holding on to lucid suspicion, is also a form of intelligence. The next morning, I woke up early, not to be wary of anyone, but to see the sunrise. The light shone through the teacup, creating a yellow patch on the table. I looked at it for a long time, then said softly, to no one, for no one to hear, "I won. Not against her, not against the court, but against the part of me that once wanted to give up." When Daniel came to pick up the kids, he asked, "Mom, do you want to move? This place has too many memories." I smiled. "Memories can't kill anyone, Daniel. Only when we let them live again without learning anything from them." He nodded, hugged me, quickly, then left. I stood by the window, watching the car's shadow disappear down the gravel road. At night I sat alone, poured the last of the tea, and turned on the old recorder. This time, not to save evidence. Just to hear the sound of myself in a quiet house. Click. August 2nd. If anyone finds this recording, please know. I am still at peace, and I hope you are also learning to trust your own memories. I turned off the machine. Set it down. No more red light needed. If you are still listening this far, thank you for spending time with my story. Please leave a comment. Let me know. What city are you listening from? And if you want me to continue telling stories like this, don't forget to subscribe. A small click, but to me, it's a promise that those who still believe in the truth are still here.